Probably not. Yeah, the middle school, the high school, and a professional group are having a jazz concert tonight.
Oh, all right.
And what time does that start?
7 at
7 o'clock?
LTMS.
At LTMS,
Yes.
right?
With our middle school and high school and a professional
That
group.
should be a good performance.
Should be.
I'm sorry I'm missing it.
Me too.
All right. It is 7 o'clock. We will call the November 15th DeSoto City Council meeting to order and start with roll call, please.
Daniels.
Yes.
Hannah Michael.
Yes.
Ritter.
Here.
Murdoch.
Here.
And Councilman Lane is absent.
Okay. Our first item tonight is our Pledge of Allegiance. My goodness, I almost forgot. Please rise. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Our first item is our consent agenda. We'll approve the minutes of the council meeting of November 1st and approve pay ordinance number 842.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
There's a 4D in our packet, not a 4D on the agenda. Do we need to amend the agenda?
Let me have a look at the agenda that I've uploaded.
My agenda has a 4D.
I'm sorry, yeah, the one online does not. That was a late edition. I must have uploaded the wrong one. The hard copy.
Issue. Do we need to?
I don't know how official this uploaded version is. Patrick, is it?
Should we just amend the
Yeah.
agenda to include item 4D and the?
Probably to be safe, it'd be probably a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include item 4D related to Lexington Force Main contract.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Roll call, please.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Hannah Michael.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Item 2 is call to the public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business not listed on the agenda tonight. Comments discussed under call to public may or may not be acted on by the council during this meeting. There is a 4-minute time limit. Please stand and be recognized.
Good evening, Council. Marvin Wade, 32455 West 83rd, Apartment J. I have one thank you and 2 concerns. Thank you for the sidewalk. I noticed this sign on Lexington. There's a however. The contractors did not restore it up to grade. They restored it up to erosion grade. So you have 20 yards of good sidewalk at grade, 20 yards eroded, starting to erode already. The straw and the grass didn't take. Right by that pipe stand where there's a protection guard, there's already a ditch started, so you might want to dump some dirt in there, council, or call your contractor. The sidewalks I built, I restored it up to grade when I worked with construction company. And then I walked to the library this evening, and I don't know who's responsible for unattended shop owners cleaning their sidewalks with a sheet of ice. So I took the road. I had 2 cars look at me because I didn't have my slow walking orange on. But I just took the road because it's safer than walking on ice. I don't know if you have a policy of unattended shops cleaning their sidewalks. Somebody has to take care
Is that, I
mean, it's Yeah, in the
ordinance, right?
Yeah, the city code does require the property owner, whether the shop's vacant or occupied, it's the property owner's responsible to clear the sidewalk, just like a residence would be.
And then walking up the road last week, I noticed our retaining pipe on the bridge over the railroad track has been hit. A stanchion has come loose from the concrete. It did its job. The car obviously didn't go off the road. You might look at that.
Which bridge is that?
The bridge over the railroad track,
By
you go up to VFW when I walked
Dorothy
up,
Okay, okay.
there's a 6-inch pipe that protects that sidewalk.
Oh, gotcha.
The pipe rail.
Right.
It has been hit. And the stanchion is loose from the.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have
Thank
a look
you,
at
Marvin.
that. Thank you, Marvin.
That bridge replacement is in our CIP for replacement when we find
We just need to find $1
a
million bucks or
successful
so.
application
Yeah.
to get some funding for that.
Yeah.
Anyone else wish to address the council tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to old business. Report from Volunteer DeSoto. I think we're going to table this again for another
Yeah.
meeting.
I'll make a motion, we table agenda item 3A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. New business. 4A, consider lease agreement with Zoom Fiber for city-owned conduit infrastructure and property.
Yes, council. I'll give a brief introduction to this, and then I'll introduce Cameron Klein, and I think Patrick will need to finish up with the latest work that we did on the term just today. In your packets was a almost finalized version of a lease agreement that will make use of the city conduits that RG Fiber is going to install in the unserved areas, primarily south of K10. We'll be receiving 4 micro ducts for our own use after RG installs those, and the lease we'll lease 3 of those out to Zoom Fiber, and there's also a lease on a 30-foot by 30-foot portion of the water tower site that's at the corner of 95th and Sunflower Road. This will essentially allow Zoom to provide high-speed cable or high-speed internet service to the unserved areas, but it's our understanding that Mr. Klein's intent is to provide a fiber internet, broadband internet network throughout the community, just like RG would be. This is kind of a culmination of the discussion that started really the night that we formally selected RG to be our partner in that service contract. Cameron and Mike Bosch were talking in the audience that night, and kind of this proceeded from that. So it looks like we're going to be lucky enough to have 2 service providers almost day one out there, where today there are none. The contract, like I said, gives Zoom the right to 3 of the conduits and the handholds that RG will be placing in those unserved areas on our behalf. So the unserved areas, there's a map here attached to the agreement. This should be familiar to you. This orange area is the unserved areas, as we call them. The green lines here are, and this comes straight out of the RG agreement. This is where that 7-way microduct conduit will be installed, and then we'll get 4 of those microducts back. So everything in green here, we're going to be leasing to Zoom, and then these yellow circles with the square boxes there, those are the handhold locations that RG will be placing for the city's use. We'll be leasing these out to Zoom as well. So Zoom will have these handholds. There's also additional handholds that Zoom will be placing in this area that aren't subject to the lease, but those will be installed and owned by Zoom, so we won't really have any involvement with those. So this will allow service to these areas day one. In exchange for the lease, there is a $1,000 a year lease price that we'll be charging Zoom, and the lease does obligate Zoom to begin providing service within 6 months of the completion of the conduit. So it's almost like RG's contract in that we're not just going to lease him and then he has no obligation to provide service. He does have an obligation to provide that service. I'll let Patrick talk about the term, because there's some language at your places this evening about the length of the contract and the term. But the only other thing we want to bring to your attention is in regard to the 30-foot by 30-foot space at the water tower. So what I've got pulled up on the screen now is the 2-acre water tower site, and this is the site plan for our water distribution building that you can see kind of circling there. There's a parking lot that we'll be installing. And then this orange box is the portion that we're going to lease to Zoom. It's just directly north of the water tower itself. And our understanding is that Cameron's going to need to install a building, a 12 by 20, probably precast concrete building that comes in on a truck, place it there for his, essentially for a fiber hut, for his switching equipment. That'll be the main hub for his network throughout the community. We are actually leasing this 2-acre plot from SRL. And for the same reason that we're leasing the 12-acre water plant site. It's the environmental remediation has to be complete before we can take title. So it's an irrevocable lease for all intents and purposes. It's our property, but that lease document does require SRL sign off on any subleases. So we've made contact with SRL, haven't heard back from them on their signature on that, but obviously we couldn't execute this agreement until we have their written signature. So we'll need to follow up with that if we're okay with the lease that we have in front of you tonight. Possibly, yeah. Patrick, I was going to turn that over to you on the
Sure.
term language then.
Yeah, maybe before the term, I just wanted to point out, Mike, one other thing I talked to Cameron today is the revision on top of page 2 just indicates that he has exclusive access and use of the handholds that go with those conduits. So as I talked to Cameron, if we still have one additional tunnel, if we wanted to use that for the city's use or let another vendor use that, we would need to either work out an arrangement with Cameron or have different handholds, because I think Cameron was concerned about that if other people were allowed into those handholds, that could jeopardize his infrastructure. I don't know if you have any reservation about that.
I think, yeah, our thinking on that. So these are the handholds that RG is going to be putting in for us. Our thinking on it was, of course, any provider, if someone else wants to access the conduits, they're going to have to build a separate handhold. Because I mean, the way the industry is you have your own. You don't want two service providers in the same access point, because there's just potential for someone to accidentally cause a service interruption. So with these handholds that we have for the city's purposes, I didn't think it was logical to install another handhold for Zoom and keep ours empty, because it could be ours might be empty for decades. We might never use them. And so I thought it made more sense that if we're going to use our one conduit for something in the future that we've yet to identify, we'll go ahead and put our own handholds in at that time.
When we figure out where we need them and
What we're using it for and if and
when.
when.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought it's better
I
used
agree.
now.
No
yeah,
point in
than
cluttering
the
up the
future.
right of way with extra empty boxes.
And that's
that
right, that's right.
We don't know what they are.
So then, moving on to the term, initially, we had suggested a 10-year term, and Cameron had come back at 15. So the term in the agreement is 15 years, but in connection leading up to the 10th year, I did have language in here that the city and Zoom will engage in good faith discussion regarding whether the rent needs to be increased, and that's on the top of page 3, small a. And if Zoom was not agreeable to a reasonable increase, then the city could terminate on the 10th anniversary of the agreement. There is language in there that, it's not like the city could just double it would have to be a good faith discussion that, the $1,000 is completely out of line with other comparable agreements. I think there's but it also allows the city to, talk at least about raising that $1,000. And then, as Cameron explained, it's difficult for him to commit to a full 15-year term. So on page 3, the small b, under this language, it would allow Zoom in connection with at 5 years or 10 years, they could decide that they don't want to be in the lease anymore. And then if it's after the 15 years, they would simply need to give a 90-day written notice to the city that they want to end the lease. So I think that covers really the, on the page 5, there's a paragraph about allowing Zoom to assign the lease with the written consent of the city, which is pretty typical in these types of agreements. So already sent these revisions to Cameron. He's indicated they are agreeable with those. So if you're comfortable with them, we just ask for a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the revised agreement as written. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Patrick or Mike or Cameron? Motion?
Yeah, I'll act on this. It's really pretty amazing that we've got an opportunity where we've got another carrier who's going to occupy these ducts. Because, I mean, somebody could look at this and go, well, we've got one carrier in here and, nobody else wants to go there. So we're really making maximum use of the city's investment. So I'll make a motion. Is this a ordinance?
No.
No.
Just authorizing the
So I'll make a motion to give the mayor authority to enter into the agreement with Zoom Fiber LLC as presented tonight with the revisions shown.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? If not, roll call.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ponamichael,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Cameron. 4B, consider revisions to the city's personnel policy and procedures manual. Mike?
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you. This is a project we've been working on for most of the year, on and off mostly, but for the past couple of months in earnest. The last time our personnel policy manual was updated was more than 10 years ago. It was 2007. The current version was mostly formulated around 2004, and in 2007, I think we made some minor revisions to some vacation accrual procedures, but mostly it's been around since 2004 without much change. It's largely still relevant, but our policy, kind of unwritten policies, written policies, just procedures and standards has changed quite a bit. Some of those sections are really no longer reflect what we do. No longer is reflected in the policy manual. We've also had some reason. We've adopted a new pay plan, the compensation study in 2017, and we've gone through a citywide strategic visioning process that really hasn't been reflected or rolling into the policy manual really at all. And then, of course, there's been some changes in workplace norms and standards, and just some social changes that have happened since then that I thought were important to get into our policy manual. So that's kind of the reason that we undertook the overhaul rather than just kind of one-off policies. So what I did was started with the League of Kansas Municipalities has a really good template for cities, smaller cities of our size, for policy manual. And in reading through that, they updated theirs in 2017. So we kind of started there, and reading through that, it was obvious that that's exactly what we did in 2014. because the structure and the format of it is the same. Much of the wording is verbatim, just word for word, exactly what we had from 2014, the stuff that hasn't changed. But in that template, they had new policies for things like parental leave, and I've listed those on the staff report, but parental leave, sexual harassment, workplace bullying, which was a lot of the same stuff that we already had as a harassment policy, but it went into a little more, a little deeper. Substance abuse, tobacco, smoke and tobacco-free workplace, and then I think most significantly the weapons. You know, the whole gun debate's been a pretty hot topic the last 10 years or so, and the league has it's a really small section, but it's very consistent with state law. And I thought, you know, no reason not to follow what the league had laid down there. They worked on that quite a bit. And then a social media policy. You know, in 2004, when we did this, I think social media existed, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So those sections, we've taken and adapted those largely from that template. So before we brought this to the council, we did have several meetings with department heads, 3 of them, as a matter of fact, to go over the changes that we're considering. The feedback on that process was generally positive. There were a few things kind of surprised me. One of the things we kind of still are working through is the uniform policy. You know, for some reason, what people wear to work is really a big part of their social, you know, their happiness. It surprised me. But I'm willing to learn. So we're kind of, I've formed a subcommittee about that. Really, my intent is, you know, the word uniform has, you know, it has some meaning in there, you know, that it's all the same. Just over time, we've gotten away from, you know, kind of a consistent uniform look. So I want to get back to that. So just give some structure to it. But we do have different departments have much different functions and have different needs in terms of what they wear and how they look. So my intent is kind of along the line of the strategic vision that we had for increasing and enhancing the city's image. So that was my motivation for addressing it. So we've got a subcommittee working on that. I think we're going to come back later with some more detailed recommendations on that. For now, I do have some verbiage in the proposed policy that just states that we have uniformed employees in certain departments, non-uniformed employees in other departments, and we do get a little more structure to what we've gotten. You know, there's just a little more structure in there now. I think we're going to come back later and probably want a little a revision to that, but that surprised me, the uniform thing. So what I've put in your packets was a version. First of all, there's this summary document, Exhibit A, where I tried to just summarize anything that we changed, any policy that we changed, that I tried to summarize for you, just in quick form. I want to bring a couple of those to your attention. Number one, there's just kind of some introductory language in the policy handbook. It has to do with the policies intended for to increase workplace efficiency, but then there's also protections for discriminations for protected classes. And what wasn't in there, and the change that I'm proposing, is that there's language relating to protections from discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And this is one thing Patrick brought to my attention. The law doesn't require us to do that. We don't have to provide those protections. So I thought if we're going to have it in there, I wanted to bring it to your attention specifically because it's not something the law requires us to do, but is something, if it's in our personnel policy manual, we might, we would be obligated to provide those protections, and I think it's appropriate to provide those protections. And so if you disagree with that, that's fine. We can take the language out. But I thought it was important to do that, to provide provide those protections. The other item 3, relates to just the incorporation of the compensation study. There was a lot of recommendations, mostly the pay plan, and how we now based pay increases, not just on an annual review, but there's a cost of living and a merit component of that. So we've incorporated that whole pay plan and really the whole compensation study by reference. So it'll be an appendix to the policy manual. Item 8 is grooming and dress. I talked about that. We'll come back probably with more on that later. Item 10 relates to on-call. Currently, we don't really have any policy for on-call, and in a couple of our departments, the water, the sewer, and the street departments, we think it's important to have 24-hour readiness. Obviously, it is. We don't really have a policy for assigning, okay, who's on call, who's not. Right now, it essentially is just kind of the department heads are mostly in charge of that, and if they get a call and they're out of town, then they'll call people in their department, and it's worked okay, but there's not really a formal set policy where, you know, we're going to assign someone who's actually on call. So if we're going to do that, which I think is important, I also think it's appropriate to compensate that person if they're going to be expected to be on call and within a certain geographical area and you know, be able to respond to an emergency situation. So the policy just stipulates that department heads will establish an on-call schedule, really at their discretion, so I'll let them figure out how they're going to handle that. And then for every hour that you're on call, we're going to pay a person 50 cents an hour for being on call. So it works out to, you know, 30, 40 bucks a week or something if you're on call all week and over the weekend.
And Mike, is that a normal rate for municipalities?
Yeah,
I don't have a feel for that at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. I just knew that it was appropriate. So yeah, and in researching that, it's pretty comparable. Olathe has a policy where they'll pay for every weeknight that you're on call, they'll pay you 1 hour of your normal pay. And for weekends, it's 2 or 2.5 hours of your normal pay. So they do it a different way, but it works out about the same. From a budgetary impact, all departments for all year long, it'll increase our personnel budget by about $10,000 per year. So that's compared to an overall personnel budget of $2.7 million. So it really is a nominal thing, but it's enough to, I think, fairly compensate for somebody for being. So, yeah, that 50 cents, or I'm saying 2% of their normally hour rate. So some, if it's a department head, that might be above 50 cents. I thought what I wanted to do is have it to where people would notice it on their paycheck so that they're willing to be on call, you know, as long as they're not called in every single night. You know, if you're on call, you might get called in once a week. And when you do get called in, you are paid at who's buzzing? Is that me?
That's not me.
Okay. You get paid overtime.
It's Lori for the record.
Okay, for the record, make the minutes. You are paid at overtime rate and a 2-hour minimum, whether you come in for 15 minutes or 2 hours. The other aspect of the on-call policy, and I don't know if I put it here in the summary, but there's an expectation of a response time. And so this is something else that Patrick brought to my attention. Initially, I had some provision in there that the on-call person needed to be available within 30 minutes of the call. They had to be able to get here and start their work. But I come to understand that you can't, you have to allow a response time plus the employee's normal travel time to work. So if an employee lives 45 minutes away, you have to allow him that 45 minutes. So it could be more than 30 minutes. I don't know if we have any employees that live much more than 30 minutes away, but so the response times are something that it could be longer than 30 minutes. The other thing is to call and be in contact with somebody is different from arriving on site at the job. The other thing related to on-call is that we're going to allow the person who's on-call to drive a city vehicle home. That's another, I think, way to compensate for being on-call, is allowing that person. Now, there's restrictions on, you can't be using that truck just as your personal vehicle. It's got to go from work to your house. I don't want to see it at Walmart. You're going to go the direct route to your house. So there's restrictions on that. But I think that'll mean something to people who are thinking about signing up for being on call. Another thing, item 13 there on the list, I'm recommending that we switch. Right now we have President's Day off as a holiday, but not Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I think we need to make that switch. There's been a discussion topic in the years past about Martin Luther King Day is in January, President's Day is in February. In the past, we've taken kind of an employee poll, say, hey, do you want to switch? And there was reluctance to switch because the holiday being in February is more spaced out between January and Memorial Day. But I just think that it's important that we recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I mean, I think, just the recognition of it is an important thing to do. But I think we'd leave ourselves up for criticism if we didn't have the day off. I think the time would come when we'd have Kansas City Star or News Channel 5 show up and ask me why we're not recognizing that important holiday. So don't think we need another holiday. And so I'm recommending to switch. I don't know that that's the most popular. Steve wants another holiday. If he has a vote, just add another one, easily problem solved.
Everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy, yeah.
Right, can you state your address?
Yeah, I would say if we didn't switch, then just give it a maybe another personal holiday so they can choose what they like.
Yeah.
If it was a big deal to us.
I don't know anybody that has President's Day off. Lawrence takes it off? Really?
We
Huh. You do?
But we're losing 3, but we're gaining 3 personal days. That's why
Oh,
it's
okay.
hard. So it makes it easier.
And
They didn't have Veterans Day.
Martin Luther King's a school holiday too, isn't it? Kids are out of school, so it's also beneficial to parents to also have the corresponding day off.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think President's Day is a school holiday, so
Hadn't been.
used to be. I don't think so.
No, it's not. It's
So
not here. in
just
DeSoto.
syncing those up is family friendly.
Well, and Kevin's suggestion is, what was your suggestion?
Well, like I said, if anybody was against the switch, then just do away with both and give them another personal holiday off, and they could choose what.
Oh,
holiday
but
they
see,
choose
then
to do.
I think we'd still be open to the criticism that you're not recognizing Martin Luther King Day.
By default, by design, or not as part of?
Okay, well, those were the things I wanted to bring to your.
Okay.
He didn't tell you he wasn't going to school. The only other thing was something that Patrick I think just researched this afternoon. There was a proposed organizational chart change, just a real small one. I wanted to put the court clerk under the city clerk because right now I have 9 people directly reporting to me, and I'd rather have closer to 6 or 5 people. And so just kind of a way to get some structure is more of a selfish motive for me, but I think statutorily I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. The court clerk has specific duties that can't be directed by the city clerk, and it would take a charter ordinance change. So we're going to put that off for now. Is that
Yeah.
a decent summary of that, Patrick?
It's a little bit complicated, but yeah, at minimum, we would have to do a charter ordinance, which wouldn't go into effect for 60 days. And even then, you would be having the city clerk sort of take the place of the judge in a way, given that right now the municipal court clerk by statute is doing things under the judge, or at least statute-wise. So it would take some. I just indicated to Mike for right now. We can't make that change. We could keep studying it, and if that's something we really want to pursue, I think we could do it. But it would take definitely some paperwork, and then just not sure, practically speaking,
Yeah,
Okay.
and right. My motivation for doing it wasn't for any grand efficiency thing. It was really just structural. So I think it's fine if we
All
don't
right.
do that.
So now we need to back up and discuss any of these. Is that
Yeah,
appropriate?
Sure,
So we
sure.
want to go back to any concerns or comments on item 1, adding language for additional protections that are not currently required by state law. Anyone have issues with that? Okay. Pay study, I wouldn't think we'd have any issues with incorporating that, right? Any concerns about the on-call policy as described tonight?
If I could just,
Does that apply to council and mayor as well, or is that?
I hadn't thought of that. No.
Sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
I was just gonna point out that the whole commute to and from work, there's not a regulation that strict. I mean, it turns out, practically speaking, that's essentially what it is. But what the regulations say is to prevent on-call time to being considered work. Meaning, if it's considered quote unquote work, you have to pay full hourly rate and overtime. So you need to be very careful to make sure that any on-call time does not so restrict an employee's personal pursuits that, you know,
They're
essentially
de facto
waiting-
working.
Right, well, they're sitting at home
Yeah,
waiting.
waiting to
I
work.
want- And so that's the thing with the transit. If you have a 30-minute response time and someone lives 30 minutes away, they essentially can't do anything because they have to be ready. You know, the only time they would have was driving. So that's why I define it as excluding the transit time. Courts have said 15 minutes of response time is fine. That's legal, but it did concern me, you know, for people that live a distance away that you would. So that's just a little more explanation on why it excludes that travel time. And you know, we did talk in the committee that may end up excluding, you know, people that live a long distance
Further
away.
distance, right? They wouldn't fall into the category that would be able to adequately provide on-call service.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought we wanted to leave that up to department heads.
Sure.
Yeah, because that changes all the time. You know, people move and
Right.
new employees. Yeah.
Mayor, can I back up to number 6? I had a question on
Sure.
the drug screening. You have a pre-employment drug screening.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything for either periodic, random testing?
No. No, we don't.
You're not in practice or think it, or thinking to put it in the policy anyway? Because you do say something about maybe being in an appendix.
Yeah, if I can address that.
Yeah.
The reason I use that verbiage because the laws are getting fairly strict now on drug. You know, it used to be any new applicant that was part, you know, go get a drug test regardless of what job you did. Now it's very clear that even for pre-employment or in connection with hiring someone, you have to make sure that that position is a safety-sensitive position from the standpoint of you have to have a valid reason because we're government, unlike a private employer. A drug test is considered in violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's considered essentially a search because we're government. So that's why I put verbiage in there that, you know, testing would be, you know, I would consult with Mike and I think if we're going to do any random testing, as you're talking about, I would want a very clear policy to attach that would let employees know exactly, you know, what they're signing up for. So.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be in situations where, you know, you're requiring a CDL, you're either a driver, you're equipment operator, or you're, you know, wastewater plant operator, where those are safety sensitive positions.
Yeah, they do get, you know, currently the positions you mentioned, they, as
But it's not part of the policy. Should it be defined?
It's not
It-
current.
it,
Well, it's pre-employment, but I mean, on a periodic basis, or in the event of, say, if there's an accident in a city-owned vehicle or an accident on a piece of equipment or something to that effect, should there be a test? Just a question.
Yeah,
I'm not
just
saying.
looking at the language. I mean, by the revisions, I didn't mean to stop our current practice. I mean, my anticipation was we would still be doing drug testing for any safety-sensitive position, just like we do now. But it's true that beyond that, we don't have. I mean, there'd be nothing preventing us if there was a bad accident, subjecting that employee involved to testing. But you're right, in the policy.
So you're saying you don't have to have a policy to say, okay, you're rear-ended a vehicle with a city truck or something, you need to go for a drug and alcohol screen.
I think we should have a policy. And that's why I have this appendix set up, and I indicated to Mike that's something that I want to work on and have as part of the policy. And it'll be in Appendix E. It wasn't anything that I could pull together as part of, your approval of this. And so I thought it indicates now that as long as city attorney and city administrator were okay with that policy, it would be attached. But if you want us to bring that back, we can do that too.
No, I just wanted to discuss it, that's all.
Well, so in answer to your question, there isn't anything in the current policy about drug testing. Am I incorrect about that?
Well, there's
pre-employment.
Well, there's a
Yeah.
practice. We have a practice to do that, pre-employment. But I'm not sure if it's in the policy.
Yeah, no, there's a
I don't think
lot
it's
of
in
the work comp insurer over the years has given Lana different policies that they want. Like one of them is return to work. Work comp insurance. They want you to have a mandatory light duty work because that diminishes them having to pay the employee. And also in connection with that, there's also accident reporting, and part of that is talks about drug testing. But as far as I know, that was never formally adopted as part of the council. It's just sort of a collection of paperwork that Lana would keep as part of her book. As far as I've been here, I don't know that we've ever tested someone for drugs outside of the pre-employment practice.
Right.
Okay. So that'll be coming later.
Yes, my intention is to have that policy, and then Mike and I, as we're comfortable, will attach it as part of the
Yeah.
policy.
All right. So back to the on-call. Any concerns, reservations, or issues with the on-call as presented?
I don't.
Okay. Number 13, the holiday switch. President's Day for MLK Day.
Go with.
Yeah, I agree with Mike that eventually it will be will be asked why are you the only community in the county that does not observe Martin Luther King Day, and so we'll preempt that.
We'll do it.
Let's see. That was the last thing I had noted that you wanted.
Yeah, that was the last thing I brought up. in
Were there any
particular.
other parts that anybody read that they have any questions about? Okay.
If you're inclined, Patrick did prepare a resolution, Exhibit D, that's very into the staff report.
Mike, if I can just ask you, you answered a couple of my questions as you went along. One, I like that you got department head involvement, that you had staff involvement in the process of rewriting this, because when you open up policy, hang on because you don't know where it can go. So I appreciate you had their involvement. You made a comment, early that, you're keeping it up based on practice, and, policy definitely drives culture, right? And culture influences the way you write policy. How do you feel about workplace culture here at the city, and how do you feel that the policy is how consistent do you feel it is with that, or how do you feel it helps to shape the workplace culture that you've got?
Well, I think the culture here is fantastic. I mean, you can look at the longevity of employees, just how many people have been here for. I mean, people, they don't leave here disgruntled. I mean, I don't know that we've ever had anybody leave here because they didn't like working here. So, in terms of internal culture, I mean, I've just consistently from not being administrator to being administrator. I just think that we've developed a workplace here that people don't dread coming into work on Mondays. That's kind of something that I've looked to. Do I look forward to Mondays? Well, maybe you don't always look forward, but you don't dread them. So in terms of culture, it's great. Does this policy, do these changes, foster, some strong strategic vision or to enhance that? I can't say that really what we're doing here has a grand design toward that end, but making them more consistent with what I think is fair and what I think is appropriate, and what meets our needs. Current practices aside, is this consistent with what DeSoto needs? I think what we've got now certainly is a vast improvement over the current version, which is outdated. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Well, it does. I guess I was just wanting to, as you're trying to foster a very positive kind of culture here that you've been able to include, or have had the opportunity to include or modify the kind of things that will continue to promote that. It looks like you have. I mean, particularly as I look through things like your, some of the changes you've made to time off situations. Mm-hmm. It looks very positive. I think you've done a good job of keeping it very current, very contemporary. You're addressing a lot of the kinds of issues that a lot of policies have not been keeping up with. So I commend you for that. You obviously had a good guide that you were working with the league's template. Yeah. So I think you've made some very, very positive changes, and I think it's a policy that looks like it promotes a very progressive, productive workplace.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
Got a number, Patrick?
1003.
I'll make a motion then that we approve resolution number 1003, updating and amending the city personnel policy and procedure manual.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion, a second. Roll call, please.
Daniels.
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Item 4C, consider adoption of updated building codes.
Yeah, this is Steve and Cameron.
I make a motion.
Table.
We need
I already
to,
did that last meeting, and I pulled this. I will say, I this was a last minute scrub from the previous agenda on the first, and we talked about positive workplace environment. Steve wasn't too happy with me for a couple hours there on Friday morning, so I apologize for that.
It was important to us that we give, and we've been talking to our building community about the building codes. This will be the third time in my capacity as a building official that I've come forward to the council with code revisions. And as some of you may or may not know, the ICC family of codes are actually revised every 3 years. We've historically chosen not to do that, and that's kind of been my direction since I've been here. Every other code cycle, every 6 years, we adopt them. It's hard on the building community when they're constantly changing codes, and most of the cities don't adopt every 3 years. The other thing is it's difficult on us because we have to interpret those codes and make the changes with them. The other thing is just the cost of it, because the code books are expensive. It's expensive to, to implement the whole process. We'll have probably $1,000, maybe a little more than that, around $1,200 in code books just for this change. So again, it's expensive to do that. The other thing is our builders and our contractors have to have those codes too. And Mike was asking me, he said, well, don't they have them online, or don't they have them in a PDF version? It's yes, but in the code world that we live in, everything's written. It's on books. When you want to research something, you don't go to that PDF. You open the page, and then you go back and forth in the book. And so it's expensive to do that. The ICC family of codes we're adopting is 18. You'll note that the National Energy Code, and it's an NFPA code, is a different cycle. It's always a year behind. So we're adopting the 18 ICC codes, are asking you to. And the NEC is a 2017, but it is in the same series of code adoptions. This year, the changes are less significant. I had an extensive PowerPoint that I brought last time for the 2012 codes, and in talking, we decided that we weren't going to do that this year. The code changes are more clarification, fixing loopholes, things that needed to be clarified. There are some changes to some of the span tables and those things that are constantly evolving because of materials. But the changes this year are a whole lot less significant. Last time we had a lot of changes with the energy code, which this year we don't have. As I said, they're a constant evolution. We've added some codes, and Cameron's going to talk a little bit about that. The existing building code and a solar energy provision that we're going to ask to have amended and approved. I've asked Cameron Mothmer, who's our building inspector, to attend this evening. I don't know that you had a chance in a meeting to actually meet him and have a chance for him to discuss with you some of the things that we do. We're real proud of him. In the past year and a half, he has passed 11 ICC building inspection certifications. And by the end of this year, he'll have passed 16 of those certifications. And if this is the track he's on, which we've had an education program with him, he'll be a certified building official for the city the first of next year.
Wow.
Okay, good job.
Which we've never had. Our department is proud of the reputation that we have with residents, contractors, builders. We're accessible through cell phones, text, email. We really work to try to keep ourselves available in the community. And I think you'll rarely hear a complaint about us. We will be hosting a meeting in the first week of December with all of our builder contractors here at City Hall. And to give them an opportunity again to sit down with us and one-on-one talk some of the code changes and some of the questions or issues on inspections, that type of thing they may have, so we can kind of preempt anything that would occur after the first of the year. The first year is a good time to adopt these because our building code activity typically between December and February kind of falls off, as you know, with the weather. So it gives us a little more time to work with them and then more time to adapt to any of the changes.
A question for you then, Steve. Would these then only apply to permits issued after we?
Yes, if we issue a permit on December 31st, it's going to be under the 2012. If you pull that permit on January 3rd, it'll be under 2018.
So if I follow on to that though, and then I know changing codes of pain, do they have sufficient notification or I don't know what projects are underway such that things have been designed or
Oh, yes.
spec'd or bid to
Yeah.
the codes that are currently in force?
Yes. You give you
So
a good
it's-
example of the apartment
Right,
project
so-
that's currently in the
Right.
planning
So that's a
process. When
so
we
how are you
met
gonna
with them,
administer
They
that?
were appraised that we're going to have the 2018 codes, and they were expecting it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been giving people a heads up to be planning on the
Absolutely.
new codes coming online.
Absolutely. If you go to our webpage, the new city website, which is awesome, if you're under building inspections, there's a note in there that we're looking at adopting the 2018 codes. So if anybody goes in and looks at it, they're going to see it right away. We're telling them up front, here's what we're going to do. And we do that all the time. We talk to all of our builders. They know it's coming. They know the code process that's going on. We have met with the building officials from other cities. Home Builders Association, a number of the groups meet during the year preceding these changes. And we kind of vet out a lot of those issues through that group too.
Okay.
So I'm gonna let Cameron talk a little bit about some of the reasoning and some of the significant changes that we're seeing with this code.
Like Steve said, I'm Cameron, for those of you that I haven't met. We're wanting to go to 2018. One of the big things, 2012 code books are not going to be published after this year. So getting additional resources as things wear out becomes an issue. We don't evolve and go to new code cycles. The other thing is, if you fall behind code cycles, it makes it harder to catch up in the future, as some cities here in Johnson County are finding out this year, trying to go from 06 to 18. They are having a lot further of a hurdle than we are. We tried to limit the number of amendments this year on this cycle, just to try to keep it more consistent. And speaking with the builders, they all, every city interprets things differently. They all would like a little bit more uniformity, to know if I go to DeSoto, I'm going to be held to the same thing I'm going to be held to in Lenexa. By limiting the amendments, we're allowing the code to do what it was designed to do. The code is backed by research and development of safety products for life safety in the construction industry, as opposed to us putting our bias on the way we would like to see things built. That's another big thing we hear with builders is, well, this city tells me I have to do it this way because that's how they want it done. We're trying not to go that way. We don't want to be that way. We want to stick with the code. So you'll notice the amendments this time are a lot less than they were last time. Like Steve said, we've got some new code books on the list that we've never adopted before. The existing building code, this is kind of a forced change. The existing building code sections used to be a part of the International Building Code. The ICC removed those sections from the building code and put them in their own book in 2018. So by adopting the building code, if you don't adopt the existing building code, you have no leg to stand on when it comes to construction in existing buildings. So that's why that one's in there. The solar energy provisions, we're moving more and more towards green energy. This year alone, we've had 2 or 3 solar installations on residential houses, and we've been in contact with 2 companies and know of at least 2 more coming in the next few months. The solar energy provisions, they took a lot of things from multiple books that all touched on solar and put them all in one book. That gives us one book. We can tell the contractors when they ask, what are we going to be held to? The International Solar Energy Provisions is the answer. They know what they're expected to do. They know what's required of them. It's very clear. So it clears a lot of that up. The other one is the accessibility, A117.1-2017. It's an update from 2009 on the ADA standard. We've never adopted an official code. It's always just been ADA is something that people are held to at the federal level, by federal law. This 2017 book is a modernized version of the 09 ADA standards. It modernizes it to allow for some greater areas for power chairs and scooters that we're seeing more and more, as opposed to the manual wheelchairs of old that you just don't see as often anymore. The power chairs take a little bit more room to maneuver at times, certain stuff like that. By adopting the 2017 update of that, it gives us something on, especially commercial sites, when they ask, as far as working spaces, height, stuff like that, what they're going to be held to. They can see that we've adopted the 2017. They know, they're not going to be able to get by with what they've been able to for a long time because of the way things are going. The industry's going towards independent mobility in power chairs and stuff like that. And that's what that 2017, that's the primary change from 09 to 17. By adopting it, it gives us an adopted set of standards to show to the contractors what they need, instead of just saying, well, just follow ADA guidelines because we don't have an adopted standard. this is the adopted standard put together by the ICC based on federal ADA guidelines. Some of the major changes, there's really only one major change that we are looking at, and it is minor in comparison to 2012 when we adopted those codes. In residential construction under the energy code, they can either go the prescriptive path, which is follow every requirement in the book, or the performance path with a third-party HERS rater. It's called a HERS score. It's an energy auditing system. They're a nationally certified system that's recognized by the code. Basically, they hire an energy auditor who comes in and does insulation inspections, make sure that houses are insulated properly, make sure that vapor barriers are installed where they need to be to prevent, as we're building houses tighter and tighter, to still have enough ventilation in there to not have a mold issue, not have stale air syndrome, not have reduced oxygen levels inside of homes. In the past, in 2012, we set our minimum HERS score at 85. The lower the number on your HERS score, the better. 85 in comparison, I believe the year was 2003 that they used as the baseline. 2003, if you built a house under the code, you would be at 100. So 85, you're building a house 15% better than you would be in 03 energy-wise. We are proposing to go down to 80. We looked at going lower because in this market, our average in our market is 71 in the last 2 years, with several coming in the mid to low 60s. So we looked at going lower than 80. However, in our meetings with the Johnson County Building Officials Association, the Home Builders Association, contractors, through all of our research, 80 seems like a number that everybody in Johnson County is going to go with. It's kind of a happy medium for us to get the houses even more energy efficient, but yet not jump the price of a house overnight by $3,000-4,000 by lowering it too much. Because when you do that, obviously the market will stall if a house jumps overnight and it's the same house. So we decided at 80 just to go in line, once again for uniformity across the jurisdictions in the metropolitan area. In the past 2 years, we've only had 2 come in higher than 80, and both of those houses were built with 80% efficient furnaces. The simple addition of a 92% efficient furnace would have brought them to 80 or lower. So we feel it's a move that is attainable without requiring much extra from our builders, but it's a move that makes a house even more energy efficient for the end user, the buyer of the home. This HERS score is something that is used in the market. Homeowners now are wanting to buy energy efficient homes. They understand the cost savings that they can get from it. So that's why we're proposing to go to an 80. You'll notice we wrote an amendment about making the sprinkler provisions in 1- and 2-family dwellings optional as opposed to required as written in the code book. That's driven by state law. As in the past, state law hasn't changed. The state of Kansas has a law that we cannot enforce, we can't require. Instead of completely removing them from the code book, we left them in there as an option. So if we do have somebody that wants to put a sprinkler system in their house, as we have a couple here that we have voluntarily wanted to put sprinkler systems in, then we have a standard that it's got to be built under instead of just making stuff up off the top of our heads. So like Steve said, overall, they haven't changed significantly. Most of it is in language changes, clarifying the way things are interpreted, making it a little bit more clear and concise to try to make it a little bit more uniform across municipalities, which is why we are suggesting going with 2018 codes as opposed to staying with the 2012. We've got several builders here in town that build all over Johnson County. We've got Harding Contracting, Remington Custom Homes for 2 examples. They build in Lenexa, Shawnee, Olathe, Overland Park, as well as DeSoto. Everybody in Johnson County is planning to go to 2018 in the first 3 months of next year. So we feel it important to move with everybody else to keep that uniformity. In order to ensure that our construction remains as good in safety and quality aspects as everybody else in the area.
Questions for Cameron or Steve?
I think it was a great presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it looks like we have a few motions to make then to finish the business on this item.
Do we have ordinance numbers?
Yep. I make a motion we approve ordinance number 2451, adopting 2018 building-related codes to the ICCA 1171217 standard for accessible and usable buildings and facilities.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Daniels,
Yes.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2452, adopting 2018 edition of the International Fire Code.
Second.
All right. Ritter, motion by Councilwoman Murdoch, second by Ritter. Roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2453, adopting 2018 edition of the International Private Sewage Disposal Code.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2454, adopting 2017 edition of the National Electric Code.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to approve. Roll call, please.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again.
We're done.
4D, consider bids for Lexington Avenue sewer improvement. Brad.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, before you is the bid results for the Lexington Avenue Sewer Force Main. This project's actually been around for a while. We've talked about different options. And we finally got to the point where we've got a consensus.
I love getting things off of for a while.
Getting things done.
This thing is just
Anyway,
so
I was
old.
pleased that we did have 9 bidders on this project. All interest during the whole bidding process. The location is the areas behind these houses. These homes all have less than an acre. They're all compliant with our sewer codes, our private wastewater systems. Some of them are failing as we speak. So this is an appropriate time to take care of this. Hoy Excavating was a little better, 35,042. Our company's been around for several years and have done work in the area, so we feel confident that they'll do a good job on this project. As an overall.
Okay.
Can you
What,
go ahead?
what the heck is the deal with the bid spreads?
I don't know, I was just talking about that with food and lunch, yeah, but Mino Brothers always seems to be really odd, and I was.
I don't think it's their normal cup back. You're right. They're more road builders, general.
But why did they bid it
I don't know, because they're looking for work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of crazy how much spread, but how even it, you can kind of step right through.
Yeah.
Was there any questions about clarity in the specs or plans or anything?
Didn't have any.
Or,
Got a few calls, clarifying about some details that we had, but nothing that was any.
I was really surprised to get 9 bids on this. I
yeah,
guess
I'd be
it's small
surprised
enough
about that too, because if the bids are coming in high because they're busy, why bid?
Yeah.
And so then, do we feel because of the spread that Hoy it's a responsible bid?
Well, the next high is 41, so it's $6,000 more.
Yeah, which is like 15%.
Yeah. A small project like this, you do get larger
Yeah.
spreads.
After, I told them that they were the low bidder, and didn't seem to bring up any concerns.
Yeah. I mean, it's. How long, I mean, that's not
One
that
of them.
long of it. Was it like 1,000 feet of small diameter pipe, something like that? Is it?
I think it's about 1,400 feet because we go down that back row and then we have to go west along
Back
91st
to catch a
Street to
manhole,
catch a
okay.
manhole. So yeah, it's all 1.5 and 2-inch HDPE stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't complicated.
No, it's not complicated, but and then that's why it surprises me that there's so much spread. But are we confident in, no exceptions in materials or no exceptions in restoration or issues like that in terms of the response?
No, I didn't have any questions along those lines at all. Pretty clear, I thought our pretty good. We didn't have any questions on materials or installation process or anything like that. It was all just, how do you want to tie into the manhole? Can you give me the elevation of the manhole? Things like that.
Pretty common.
My question was going to be, how much is it then for the homeowners to tie in? Do you remember? I don't remember what that amount is to. No, just in
Yeah.
general.
We did. We had, I mean, over the years, we had several estimates. So the thought would be that the force main's there for them to tie into, and what the homeowner would have to do is install his own grinder pump. And the units we have priced out, and they're getting better all the time, are a self-contained standalone thing that'd be buried in the backyard with it has the wet well and the pump in it. It's all self-contained and all the controls. I think the last time we priced those out was somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,000 to purchase the unit, and then it'd probably be another two or three or maybe four to install that unit and they'd have to put a line from there back to the force main. We were thinking somewhere around $9,000 to $12,000 to the homeowner to do that, which is very comparable to a repair on a septic or a new septic system, which they otherwise would have had to do if the septic system fails. Steve, did I lie?
The replacement of septic tanks today is anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000.
Yeah.
And these systems, we're putting them in now. Don Parr's got several of them on the north side of 83rd Street, and they're less than $10,000
Okay.
installed.
Okay.
Now, the other thing Mike and I had talked about is waiving the permit fee to these residents to hook up.
Yeah, the
Right,
sewer tap
encourage
fees, we're not going to charge sewer tap fees for them. Now, I think we do need a permit,
We do
obviously,
want a
but
permit, but we'll waive the request that we waive the fees to encourage them to get hooked up.
And we'll probably have two immediate requests for connection, right? I'm assuming the two houses that are
I'm
rehabbing.
gonna send a letter out. I was waiting for your approval tonight. We'll send a letter to all 10 of these residents, and I'm anxious to see what my reply will be, but I'm expecting 2 or 3 of them immediately. One of them has no sewer service at all right now.
Will they be required to go this route rather than
We will not replace or repair any septic system.
in that area anymore? Okay.
If they come to us or we're aware of a problem, then they'll be required to hook up.
Required to do this.
Which is the same thing we do now in the other areas. There's a lot of septic systems through the city that people don't realize these homes are on private wastewater. If they have a failed system, we won't approve on a small lot like this, putting it back on a system.
Okay.
We want it in the sewer.
Good.
I was just gonna mention too, just this discussion made me remember, I just looked it up, there's a provision of the city's code that indicates that if you're within 140 feet of a sewer, you have to connect. And I just wonder, with the grinder pump, Mike, would that be considered an exception since you're not just hooking in, or
no, I mean, that's a connection. We consider that a connection.
is this says they have to do it within 90 days of notice from the building inspector?
Well, we're not.
We're not
we're
going
not
to
gonna-
force anybody.
We're not going to require it until they need.
Well, I mean,
sewer
I think
work.
the only situation where we might have to require if someone's
a
septic
failing
system has
system.
failed and it's
Right.
an environmental
Right,
hazard.
you've got a
Yeah.
health issue there. You've got to deal with it, but
Yeah.
What's the estimate for completion on the project once it's approved?
Timeline, you mean? Did they?
We had 60 days in the contract.
Okay.
Pretty simple, straight shots.
the easement's acquired on the school property. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So are there still 2 houses empty there that are not
Well, there's one.
being used, or
Is
just
it,
one?
aren't both of those?
Just
There's only
one?
one that's vacant?
One that's vacant and one that we know that has a failing system
Mm-hmm.
currently that there's no room on the lot to replace that system, so this is an immediate fix for them.
Right.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'll make a motion. We accept the bid from Hoy Excavating to complete the Lexington Avenue Sewer Force Main in the amount of $35,292.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Item 5, executive session. We have none, but,
None this evening, no.
okay. Advisory reports, city administrator.
No report this evening.
What?
Happy to answer any questions you might have. Is that a surprise?
Well, I'll make you do a short one. I asked
Okay.
Mike what the progress was on the RG Fiber contract, if we had him
Right.
underway. So just a quick
Yeah.
update of where we are with that.
Yeah, we just this afternoon got in the required bonds and insurance papers that finalized the contract. Made his $300,000 payment, so gave him that. So the contract's officially in action, and we're scheduling a kickoff meeting for the week after next week's Thanksgiving.
Holiday,
So it'll be that last week in November. We'll have a kickoff
So
meeting.
his 12-month clock is running.
Yes.
To start today.
Yeah. Permits.
When he pulls his first
yeah,
permit?
I think
Okay.
it's after permits of the 12-month clock. He has already met with Dave Rhodes at Clearview City, and he has started discussions with the school district as well. Talked to the chamber about service. You just kind of hit the community really already, and so we're anxious to get started. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Patrick?
Just on the RG Fiber, I just wanted to let the council know, after you approved the agreement, the bonding company, I had several discussions with them. They wanted language added to the bonds excluding, essentially indicating that the bonds did not apply to the 20-year commitment that RG Fiber made to provide service to the public facilities. So I went ahead and added language to the bonds, and those are the bonds that Mike brought in today. I didn't think it was that significant of an idea, thing to need to get your guys' approval first. So I just wanted to let you know I did that.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Brad, anything for the group?
Yeah, I just had a couple things, just to those on the planning commission agenda. To make them earn their pay on the 27th. Do the Country Village Apartments, which is a 342 apartment complex site plan, and Mike and I have been reviewing that, and Steve and Cameron as well. The Arcadia Estates preliminary plat, also put on the agenda, and we'll have the text amendment public hearing for the electronic billboards.
A busy meeting. Good. Okay. Anything else? All right. Council comments. Kevin, you want to start?
Yeah, I had brought up a pole issue with Mike's and some wiring earlier, so he's gonna fix that for me. You talked about the pothole out there on that thing, at the Commerce Lexington. How's that coming along? Do we have any estimate?
The
of
ramp
time?
pothole?
Yeah. Or not the pothole itself, but the
The
light
light project.
yeah,
Oh, the
light
signals?
project, Yeah.
Well,
We have, yeah.
we are, we'll probably have plans to Mike. CFS engineers will have plans to Mike. We could probably send him plans. I was looking at them the other day. Looks like they're ready to send to KDOT to have them reviewed. So we'll send them to Mike to look at them.
I saw some cars just screaming through there the other day and just made me think about it again.
Yeah.
And then I thought about the other councilman's comments about changing the crosswalk yellow flashing lights to red. Have we thought about that anymore? Because when I come up Wea after dark, at dark, there was a young man crossing the road, and it seems like that lighting is not as good as it was.
So
before.
You mean the one by Dollar General?
No, well, that one too, but the one that actually doesn't have any flashing lights at Wea. And,
the crossing, the mid block, or the
Crossing
crossing at Wea,
Lexington.
where
Kind of by JT's.
it's
just
on
so
down
the-
from it, but you change from one side to the other side of the street. Right
Yeah,
there.
there's no lights there.
Yeah, but no, but I'm just thinking that we might want to consider either some better lighting.
Oh, you mean
additional
like,
street lighting
Street
to
lights.
lights. Yeah, that's always good
or
to light the
putting some
crossing.
sort of flashing signal there as well, because
yeah.
it just
If
There was
we
no-
upgrade the one by LTMS, could the other one be moved and relocated?
Yeah, I don't know about that. But your idea, Rob, was kind of the whole. We have several crossings there. One at 91st Street that's not the best.
Yeah, and I've actually had discussions this last week with 3 people about stoplights at 91st versus at least having something for.
Yeah.
And with the apartment complex, the DG's going in that area, that's going to become more
Yeah.
and more of an issue of at least
Right.
having a safe crossing.
I think what we need to do, we need to look globally at Lexington, those crossings on Lexington Avenue, and possibly even look into like an overhead. It's called Hawk systems. They'll have an overhead light that's normally dark, not on until someone activates it. So it's sort of like the one by Dollar General, but it's kind of beefed up. It's overhead, and I think it has much better compliance. Probably look at doing at least 2 of those, solving the thing at night.
Does that become an enforceable stop then?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But
Yeah.
the problem with that is I don't think we can do it at a T intersection
Right.
because
91st Street's that'd be a
could
problem.
not be at 91st.
It's those mid-block ones
Right.
that would work.
It
It
would
would work
be-
there.
I was just concerned for
the-
pedestrian crossing.
But back to Kevin's original, the signal upgrades that we're planning at Commerce are going to include pedestrian heads, and so we'll have protected pedestrian movements across
near
Lexington there, and the 91st Street plans are including then a sidewalk connection all along the west side of Lexington down to that intersection, so that we will have a pedestrian crossing at a signalized
So you
intersection.
don't have a stoplight and then an immediate
Yeah.
pedestrian stop.
So that's
So there'll be a new sidewalk, you're saying?
new
Yeah.
new stretch of sidewalk
Along the-
connecting 91st Street to Commerce, and then
And then there'll be a
there'll
side.
be
So
protected pedestrian.
So you'll still have
movement
kids
at
that want to just run across, but the
Yes.
proper way will be a little bit further down.
Yeah.
The safer route, the protected route, will be to go down to the signal.
And then we did have this study. KDOT did this study at this intersection of 91st and Lexington, and they have some. They still haven't approved it yet, so we don't have the formal version. But they looked at roundabouts. They looked at traffic signal warrants. Well, of course, it still doesn't meet the warrants for traffic signal now. After 340 apartments go
that
in,
could change,
it
right.
could change.
That's true.
But we're kind of hoping that the extension of 91st Street solves some of the immediate after-school congestion that we see there now. This pedestrian crossing here is troublesome. I mean, from a signalization standpoint, that's because, like Rick was saying, if there's not a traffic signal there, it's hard. You can't just put a pedestrian signal right at that
Right.
spot. So I think we need to have more of a global look at all of those and see what's best in each situation.
It's almost like you're better off taking a sidewalk up to Orchard and putting the crossing
That's
there
right.
and just getting
Yeah.
rid of the crosswalk
Yeah.
that tees across at Lexington.
Yes.
You know, so that way you can either go south and cross or go north to where the street is.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yep.
And then you can deal with it.
Is there such a sign as a no pedestrian crossing sign? No such thing, Rick?
Well, I'm sure you can make a sign saying anything you want. They're letting you. So,
But at least if there's an
yeah.
safe crossing at the intersection where there is a way for them to cross.
Yeah.
Well,
You
I
know,
just-
a lot of them are still going to want to cut it, but at least there's a safe way.
Safe alternatives, yeah.
Yeah, if you're going south, there's no reason not to take this,
Right.
really. But
And
if
there
you're-
is a lot of pedestrian traffic that direction,
There is,
particularly
yeah.
after
Are you
school.
telling a teenager there's no reason to go
Oh.
that extra distance?
Well, the school actually takes kids down to,
Yeah.
that way. So, but I did notice a young man trying to cross at Wea the other day right at dark. And it was
Yeah, that's.
for folks.
That is dark.
And it is dark, which was one of the concerns.
So thank you.
And that's
We'll
a
look at
great
it all.
location for Hawks.
Yeah, that'd be a good Hawk application there.
And like I said, by LT, I'd like to see it a little bit more active, like a hawk or something.
And light.
Yeah, because that one, while it's there, it gets ignored some. And
What-
those are your younger kids or your high school kids running over to Dollar General pre-routinely
Right.
or headed on down.
What do the Hawks cost?
The 58,000 range.
50?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got 2 poles, but
Right.
you got a pole. You can also put a street light up on it too.
Right.
So you can
Uh-huh.
create lighting and signal.
Any kind of grant funding or anything that we could,
There's
Safe route to
safe
schools.
routes to schools all the
Right.
time.
I mean, all of those
Put in
would be
enough SRS.
added to that.
Well, I knew that one had been talked about before, so I didn't know if some light had just went out or something had changed in that
Yeah,
area
I
or
know.
something, because there was a young man struck there before. I thought.
At
So,
Wea.
Yeah. So
I know we had a light installed on one of these poles. Maybe it is
it-
out.
It just may not be functioning as
Yeah.
well as it should be.
That's not it. Yeah.
Well, in the subject of safe walking on roads, the whole where the K10 apartments are going around the curve to the grocery store, you see traffic in that road too with people walking, and not a very good spot for that kind of activity either.
They have no-
And I know we aren't going to
Yeah,
just
no
go plop a
sidewalk.
sidewalk in there, but
Were they going to drop a sidewalk along the backside?
They
Have a
talked
shortcut
about,
sidewalk?
Mr. Hicks had talked
Yeah, I
about
thought he had talked about
something along here. He
from
owns all
like
of
the back of
this.
the property to the.
Well, that'd be the convenient way.
Yeah.
That's the shortcut.
and it may not even just be people living in the apartment. So they,
And Commerce
Maybe not
doesn't
what
have
other
nighttime
people-
street lighting.
there's, yeah,
It's
that's,
dark.
Mhm.
It's very dark. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Rob?
Kevin actually touched on what I was going to bring up,
Okay.
being the discussions I had with people this week about the lighting and the lights and the crosswalks and stuff.
Okay. Lori?
I don't have anything, Mayor. Thank you.
Kevin?
I have nothing to add.
All right. I have just 2 things. Last night was our council mayor's meeting. We had our electeds, our newly elected legislators and our re-electeds, and had a lot of good discussion. One thing that we talked about that, a lot of things probably aren't going to happen, but some things might. But one thing that we're asked them to, as a mayor's group, and I'll just share with you, if you agree, you could call and contact, but the distance, or the length of time from the elections now until you take office, that time from November to January seems long for a city office. And we ask that they consider allowing us to use our charter ordinance ability to adjust that if we choose to do that, so that we can have our newly elected people take office the first meeting after the results are certified. And I think the group that was there was amenable to that, so if we would, they just said just to make sure that you contact with, one of those people is gonna have to take it up, but, champion it to be the sponsor, one of those legislators, and I don't know who that might be, but, there was no opposition to that.
So is there like a new one? Because then they'd get a win right off.
Yeah, right.
It'd be an easy win.
It should be,
So we
right?
just
Good
find the
thing.
newest one and get it in there.
And then the other thing, I guess the other thing I'll share is transportation. So a big part of our talk was transportation and KDOT funding, road funding, as we're talking about KDOT's, things that we need here. But, it took us a few years to get in this mess, and so it's not going to happen. There won't be much happen probably with infrastructure transportation funding in this session. There's discussions about alternative means of collecting funds with the gas tax, more fuel-efficient cars and electric vehicles. The gas tax may not be the most appropriate mechanism, and then with the KDOT transfers, there's a lot of bond money to pay off, frankly, that was supposed to have gone for roads, so we'll be a little while probably getting back to a KDOT program or a transportation program that was something more like what we had in the past, but those were a couple of big topics we talked about. And then the other thing was our mayor's holiday dinner. Just a reminder to let Lana know if you're planning to go, so we can turn our reservations in before the end of the month. I think the 26th was the cutoff for that. I think that's all I have.
On transportation, did we participate at all in the transportation? Did we, the city, participate at all in the transportation hearing?
I think you and I got an email about sharing our local transportation needs as a part of the Johnson County community.
Right.
You know, where we were and what we felt. I don't know that we really shared anything.
No, just a response to the email. But no, we didn't go and testify. The county
Were
did
there
coordinate.
projects being advocated that kind of play into us?
I don't think, one thing that was mentioned in the discussions throughout a lot of the meetings was a I-35, I-70 connector that may or may not run somewhere near the Sunflower property. So that was probably the closest big idea that was
Well, and there's
close to us.
K10 going to 6 lanes.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering about. What about the
Lenexa
completion?
was pushing K10, but I don't know that they testified, because I talked to Tim Green, and he said he didn't testify to promote that. So
Well, that was one of those that were on their
It's already on
KDOT's
their list.
consideration list.
yeah,
before.
already.
Yeah.
I-35 and 75th Street, that bottleneck, which may affect some of our citizens in their commute, but not us directly.
With the completion of the Johnson County Gateway,
I don't know that was really there.
straightening out the 435 to K10,
Yeah,
Push
I
it out.
know.
the whole phase 3 is not being promoted.
I didn't see it in the email. I don't recall, and I didn't go to any of the hearings to hear what was presented. Or we had a lot of Johnson County representation on that task force. So I think the one I heard the most about, at least in Johnson County, was the 69 in
69.
Oval Park.
That's the one that made the paper.
Yeah.
Mayor, before we adjourn, can I make one more
You certainly
announcement
can.
that I forgot to? This Saturday from 10 to 11, I don't know how many of you guys know about this, but there's going to be an artist that brings a art piece out to Lexington Lake for a while, and her name is Anne Marie Yang, and this is being coordinated somehow with the Johnson County Art something or another, but there's a reception for her. Rotary and the Arts Council are kind of co-hosting a reception for this piece of art to be out at Lexington Lake from 10 to 11 on Saturday. So if anybody's available to come out there and see what it is, I don't know what the art piece is or anything, but
Okay.
just to remind everybody about that.
So you reminded me of something else.
And then December 1st
there you go.
is the mayor's tree lighting. And so the Rotary also does a chili soup dinner after that everybody is invited to at the community center. So we will not have a meeting before then. So I
Right,
thought you
that's
might want to
right.
mention that too. That starts usually about the soup around 5, and then tree lighting is at 5:30, and
Yes.
Santa Claus will be there, and so bring all the kids and let people know about that, and we'll make it big and merry this year.
And I was encouraging that to be like a canned food drive for the
Yeah.
food pantry
Yeah.
as well. So, yeah. I think that's it now, right? Did you have something else on your
Nope,
list?
that was
Sorry.
it. Thank you.
All right.
I'm done. I'll make a motion. We adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor? We're adjourned.